The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and welcome to Nominet's 2020 Annual General Meeting. I'm Mark Wood, Nominet's Chair, and I want to thank you for joining us today at what is Nominet's first virtual AGM. Now, before I move on, we've had one point of order from a member who is objecting to the AGM taking place and on the grounds that he has been unable to access fully in both viewing and listening because he doesn't have the technology. Now, we've checked legislation, and I'm going to read out legislation now as a point, just so that we have it on the record. The legislation says, in order to ensure that companies required by law to hold AGMs will be able to do so safely and consistently with the restrictions on movement, and in order to prevent the spread of COVID-19, the government enacted the Corporate Insolvency and Governance Act 2020 into law on 26th of June 2020. The Act offers temporary flexibility to companies as to how and when they hold their AGMs, regardless of what is mandated under their Articles of Association or what their shareholders might expect based on company past practice. We're therefore confident we've taken every reasonable step to facilitate both the voting and the remote participation, and that this meeting is validly called and needs to proceed as per the AGM notice. So I'll put that on the record. Now, we have some board members in the room with me, and like other participants, the majority are joining digitally. No matter the medium, we will still be available to respond to members' questions. I want to start by, we had an election to the board, and I want to start by congratulating Phil Buckingham, who has now been elected as a non-executive director to the board, following the vote which closed yesterday. Welcome. I also want to thank Kelly Salter, who will now step down after 3 years. The whole board wants to join me in thanking her for her superb contribution over the past 3 years and her expertise and the way she's represented the members' interests. We're sorry to see her go. On the topic of voting, I'm sure many of you will have questions about the 2018 and 2019 elections, where an error distorted the underlying voting rights calculations. It's regrettable this occurred, but I'm confident the results of the votes in those years were not affected. The board can assure members that lessons have been learned and processes put in place to avoid any repetition in future. We've written to members to explain the situation, but of course I'm open to hearing any questions or comments members may have during the Q&A session later. For now though, let's begin. Here is the running order for today's AGM. We will start with our Company Secretary, Rory Kelly, who will formally open the voting on resolutions. Then our CEO, Russell Howarth, will give us an account of the last year. Our CFO, Ben Hill, will update us on the financials before we take a short break at 11:45 to allow those who haven't done so yet to vote. Voting will close at 11:45. When we resume, we'll have a briefing session on expired domains led by Ellie Bradley. This will be followed by the opportunity to ask questions of the whole board. We'll then cover off the formal business. Today, we have 2 ordinary resolutions, one each with the auditors and the report and accounts, and a special resolution to give us the option to hold all virtual AGMs in the future. Before I hand over to Rory, I want to take a moment to reflect on the past year for Nominet, an organisation I take great pride in representing. It's been a remarkable year in many ways, but still a year of stability and growth, in spite of the enormous challenges we've collectively faced. Some of these changes were anticipated, others impossible to predict, demanding fortitude and quick action from Nominet's leadership team. The way in which the business responded to the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic was remarkable and filled me with pride and reassurance. Nominet really reacted well and quickly, and of all the companies I've been aware of, I've seen none which managed that transition to remote working and dealt with staff so efficiently. The company pivoted quickly to remote working and swiftly identified areas in which we could help the wider community. We worked with channel partners to help registrants in financial difficulties, maintained registry stability, and reached out with financial aid to the registrar channel. We supported our staff with a rapid transition to home working and launched impactful public benefit initiatives to help the vulnerable in these uncertain times. It's been an admirable response and a reminder that Nominet is a business which truly lives by its values. These past few months and the challenges of the pandemic are, however, only a part of the Nominet story over the past year. We remain, of course, first and foremost, a registry. We are committed to keeping the national namespace running securely, safely, and seamlessly for the millions who rely on us. This has been achieved for the 24th year running. Registry stability requires change, and keeping pace with the changing environment is a perpetual challenge. Meeting that challenge depends on continuous investment in the security of the registry and the in-house expertise that manages the systems underpinning the namespace. It matters enormously because we operate critical national infrastructure, safeguarding the critical digital networks that our country depends on. Beyond registry activity, Nominet has been an increasingly important cybersecurity business, which has developed further this past year. We've secured an enhanced role with the UK government's active cyber defence programme. We've also attracted the interest of nation states beyond our borders. Nominet is now a UK tech leader in this space. Indeed, Nominet is increasingly a UK success story in cyber and something all members should be proud of. Nothing could better demonstrate the calibre of Nominet's tech expertise than government and international recognition of our security capabilities. Working to protect the critical infrastructure of a nation state carries responsibilities. One is that we're coming under increased scrutiny, particularly over our board and governance. We need to be aware of that and address it. Our cyber capabilities have been boosted by 2 acquisitions. One company, US-based Siglass, has been absorbed into the Nominet family, while we acquired the technical security expertise of another UK-based XQ Cyber. These are just the first acquisitions as Nominet continues to look to expand the business's capabilities and as we build our global position in the cyber market. As Nominet moves into a landmark year, the organization will turn 25 before the next AGM. I have confidence we have everything in place to succeed and grow. Strong management, committed staff, outstanding technology, best-in-class services and products, and also, of course, a strong board gathered here, which provides good governance, expert advice, and strong strategic leadership. As well as a strong registry business and cybersecurity business, we remain a leading funder in the tech for good space, and we're making a real impact on the lives of the young. The details of our public benefit work over the past year are available in the newly launched Social Impact Report. It also lays out the path ahead as we continue to create positive changes in the lives of the generation on which our future depends. As said, we've seen Nominet at its best in the past year. This has only been possible due to the continued hard work and commitment of the Nominet team from the management down across all the business units. I recognise all of them for their efforts. I also want to recognise the role that members play in the continuing development of the registry business. This past year, a number of policy matters have attracted impassioned debate. We're grateful for the interest that many of you share in the running of the .uk namespace. It's always important for us to understand the wider views on any proposed changes to inform our decisions. That said, Nominet must ultimately act in the best interests of the registry as a whole, safeguarding the service for the future. And while one size does not always fit all, we hope there's a recognition and acceptance of serving the wider purpose. That wider purpose is one that Nominet has served since establishment over 2 decades ago and will continue to do so for many years to come. Whether through running a trusted and secure registry, protecting government networks with advanced cybersecurity tools, or supporting those who may otherwise be excluded from our Nominet society, Nominet is playing a key role in shaping a digital future this country can be proud of. I now want to hand over to our Company Secretary for the opening of the votes before our CEO, Russell Howarth, will share more details of the past year for Nominet. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For those of you who have not voted on the resolutions or proxies advising votes, voting has now opened and will remain open until 11:45. We will have a short break at 11:35 to allow members time to cast their votes. I'm therefore giving notice in advance that a poll count is being called on each of the 3 company resolutions as set out in the notice of the AGM, so we can count the weighted votes of all proxies submitted by members. If you have already lodged a proxy with Civica, then your vote will stand unless your proxy is not actually present today. If you wish to change your vote or if your proxy is not present, please respond to the email that you will have just received from Civica. I'll now hand over to our CEO, Russell Howard.
Thank you, Rory. Thank you, Mark. And good morning to everybody joining us, albeit virtually here today. I hope your families have kept safe and well over the past 6 months. From early March, life, as we know it, was suspended by COVID-19, and our business, like many others, had to adapt quickly. Our first concern, of course, was for our staff and their well-being. Working on critical national infrastructure, it won't come as a surprise that we have a significant number of the team who are formally classed as key workers. We made the decision to move the company to a full remote working situation ahead of the government lockdown. And it's testament to our years of business continuity planning that transition was so smooth. Amid the complexities of childcare, homeschooling, altered working arrangements, the Nominet service did not falter. For a registry that prides itself on continuity and reliability, this has been crucial. Equally important was finding a way, as a profit with a purpose business, to ensure we can help more widely where we could. Firstly, we helped our registrants. Acutely aware of the financial impact on sub-registrants, we set up the Nominet Support Fund to help provide a short-term financial safety net for those who might struggle to renew their domains. And we're pleased that we've helped over 40 registrars support their customers during the height of the pandemic. Although the fund's now closed, we are considering other options to encourage renewals and registrations, and you'll hear more about that over the course of the coming weeks. Now, the second way we helped was that we considered where people may be digitally excluded. Inclusion has long been a pillar of our public benefit program, and the lockdown put a sharp contrast on the haves and the have-nots. With quick action, a new initiative was born, Devices.now. And as a result, we supported the funding of over 11,000 devices and got those into the hands of those who would otherwise be isolated with limited access to public services. Now let me move on to the performance of our core business. At Nominet, we recognize we play a crucial role in the guardian of the national namespace. Over the last year, we've maintained our track record as a world-leading registry, and despite a plethora of other choices, .uk remains the most popular choice for registrants. After the expected drop following the end of the right of registration free promotions, our domains under management are currently holding steady at 10.8 million. In fact, over the course of the pandemic, we saw levels of domain registrations grow. For the first time in 8 years, April saw almost 16,000 more domain registrations than March. And from our analysis, and I think everybody may recognize this as well, many businesses, large and small, are now going online that previously weren't. And it's great that so many of those are choosing to pick the .uk domain as their home online. A key milestone for the year was reaching the right of the registration period last summer. While a break from the norm, our approach to releasing those domains had the desired effect of delivering a smooth and orderly transition. We also saw minimal impact on the DRS cases, despite predictions of an upsurge. This was a really positive outcome in a very complex area of .uk policy and testament to the stability and professionalism of the Nominet team. The enduring appeal of .uk registry also depends on working with key partners to keep the UK safe and secure to be online. We continue to work with law enforcement to identify criminality in the namespace. This resulted in the suspension of over 26,000 domains associated with criminality in the last 12 months. We've also been kept busy with anti-phishing initiatives, Domain Watch being the key. That spots domains that have been intended for criminality. You won't be surprised to hear that amongst the influx of domain registrations using keywords relating to the pandemic, a few red flags were raised and were put on hold, waiting for further due diligence. And if this process caused a short delay for some of your customers in the past few months, would like to thank you for your understanding. The responsible approach of .uk and our partners has been welcomed by key government stakeholders. Now, a good and responsible registry must also be a dynamic one. And in investing in enhancing and developing the registry is fundamental to our long-term success. And that's why this year the board have approved a £4 million investment in the registry development programme that will enhance our customer-facing systems and support the continued development of our cybersecurity capabilities in the .uk namespace. Now, the cost of developing and protecting the .uk registry continues to increase. But due to the economic climate, we've decided to keep the price for the domains next year the same as it was last year. So that is no price increase for the domains this year. And that's hot off the press from the board meeting we had yesterday. Now let me turn to our growing cyber business, which is developed from our experience of keeping the .uk namespace secure. We've expanded our role in the UK government's active cyber defence programme, working with the National Cybersecurity Centre to deliver a protective domain name system, or you may hear it called PDNS. Now that was a contract that was enhanced this year and sees us delivering a more ambitious and wider reaching solution to the government. And the latest figures that we can share are that the PDNS protected 1.4 million government employees, dealing with 69 billion queries and blocking 57 million. So a tremendous program. And this success has led to encouraging referrals. We're now working on another Five Eyes contract and have pilots underway with countries that I hope to convert into other contracts going forward. And our world-leading approach at harnessing DNS is being recognized by governments around the world as an effective way to tackle cyber threats at scale. Now, Nominet is offering cybersecurity not just in PDNS, but beyond. And this year we made two acquisitions. The first, Nominet's first, was Boston-based Cyglass, a small but growing company with an impressive network threat detection capability. From its roots that were funded by the US federal agency DARPA, the company is now transitioning into the commercial market. Their technology offers protection at the network level, spotting anomalies with advanced AI, and ensuring compliance with network policies. Now, closer to home, we acquired the assets of a UK company called XQ Cyber. And this has advanced vulnerability testing capabilities that will help inform our development roadmap. With a focus on our registry and cyber businesses, we opted to step back from our work on spectrum management and autonomous vehicles. Compared to the opportunities we see in other parts of the business, we saw those as being very hard to scale. And so we've really started to look at how we can leverage those in other ways. And that led to a superb legacy because we've passed the baton onto like-minded organizations that can take what Nominet's invested and develop that further. And so we look forward to seeing the output of that work as we look forward to the future. Now, I'd like to move on to public benefit. And we are committed to making the world more connected, inclusive, and secure. And our public benefit program continues to contribute to that goal. This week, we released the Nominet Social Impact Report, which measures the true impact of our work every year. In the last 12 months, we've reached over 720,000 young people with our programs. I think you'll agree that's an incredible figure that demonstrates real progress to our ambition to positively impact 1 million lives by the end of 2020. We've invested £1.9 million, of which 1.7 million were grants to leading charities and organizations already working to support young people with the challenges of the digital world. The projects and organizations we've worked on are diverse, from the Scouts to mental health charities like the Samaritans. And importantly, our staff live by the profit with a purpose ethos. For many, it's the reason why they joined and the reason why they stay. Now, as a member organization, we rely on the engagement, insight, and support of our members, as Mark's already touched on. Robust multi-stakeholder discussions and debates are a critical part of what we do, and member voices are key. However, I believe that we benefit from resetting our relationship with the small minority of members. It's important that the voices of the few are heard, but not to the exclusion of the many. The wider membership engagement program that we started over 2 years ago facilitates healthy discussion and offers a really good way to interact with members. The forum, by contrast, does not. It's dominated by a handful of posters, and it's increasingly become aggressive and hostile, not least towards our staff. So it's outdated, and we think that there's a number of members that can post and will post in other forums. So we know that they'll make their voices known online, and that's absolutely fine. But we don't feel as though we need a Nominet forum. So with immediate effect, we are closing the Nominet forum. Now, I'd like to balance that with my views on what we can do going forward. I think there's a real opportunity here to set up a Zoom call so we can interact on key issues that are important to you and engage with members who'd like to have a constructive dialogue about the future of Nominet.uk and the domain industry at large. So we're putting that out there, and we'd like to engage with you on those interactive sessions. Both Mark and I will be part of the Zoom sessions that we'll hold with you. So in closing, over the year, we've remained a stable registry and continue to deliver a world-leading, responsible, and reliable namespace. Our cybersecurity is attracting global interest, and we're proud of our contribution to the nation's cyber health. Our public benefit has made a real impact on young lives and supported people during this very unprecedented period. When we've got things wrong, we've held our hand up and learned from it. And we'll continue to do that, whether that's on policy or process, to find the best way forward. With your support, I think we can proudly say that Nominet is a profit with a purpose business that's increasing connectivity, inclusivity, and security of the internet, both in the UK and internationally. So I'd like to thank you very much again for being with us today. And I'd like to now hand over to Ben Hill to talk through the financials. Thanks very much.
Welcome to the webinar. You have entered as an attendee in listen-only mode.
2020. In terms of the headlines, the audited annual report and financial statements have been consistently prepared under IFRS and have received a clean audit opinion. For these results, we're now back into the regular 12-month accounting periods for both the current year and the comparatives. The main registry business remains strong, with DUM closing at 11.9 million, slightly down on last year. We noted last year that our DUM had been boosted in part by the right of registration domains, and the swings associated with these domains have now largely cleared through. This does not significantly impact the financials given the promotions associated with these domains. Excluding the promotional ROR domains, we closed the year slightly up at 10.6 million domains, ahead of management's expectations and driven by strength. We'll come on to see in the P&L account the progress to deliver our Project 2020 ambitions. As Russell mentioned, towards the end of the financial year, we completed Nominet's first acquisition, Siglass. Given the timing, this did not have a significant impact on the P&L account, and I'll come back to that later. COVID clearly is having a massive global impact. We've not suffered operationally, but we have felt its impact in the investment portfolio at the year end. But despite that, we're well positioned for further growth. So, moving on to the P&L account. Revenue overall increased by 5.4% to 45 million, driven by strong .uk performance, benefiting primarily from the phasing during the year of registrations and renewal rates, the January price rise, and cyber revenue growth. With notable successes of our UK and overseas government contracts for our protective DNS solutions outside of .uk domains, we delivered revenue of 7.1 million. That's compared to 5.7 million in the previous year. As I highlighted last year, the investments we are making to develop and diversify the business for future growth are impacting the underlying operating margin. Operating profit before public benefit spend has reduced to 5 million compared to the 7.3 million in the prior year. For any business that is developing and breaking into new areas, we do expect operating profit margin dilution as we build for future diversified revenue growth. Average headcount has increased by 27 heads to 229 during the year and will continue to grow. A real challenge we're finding in the technology sector and regionally is a tough employment market to retain and attract key technical talent to support and keep the .uk business safe, as well as the skills and resources to deliver the diversification agenda. This is reflected in the rise in the average cost per head. Public benefit spending has been at a consistent level with 1.9 million spent, the vast majority of that on the connected, inclusive and secure programs. Below the main P&L account, our statement of comprehensive income was impacted right at the end of the year with a dip in the global financial markets with COVID, causing an unrealized drop in the investment portfolio value. We've been liaising closely with our professional investment advisors during these turbulent market times. We've held our nerve and we're already starting to see the investment portfolio recovering. There will be further turbulence as the second wave spreads. We exited the financial year with a strong financial position, despite the dip in the investment portfolio, with closing net assets of 80 million. I mentioned Siglass earlier. We acquired this early stage network security business in mid-February 2020. with the acquisition cost of £4.9 million. The relevant intangible product assets and goodwill appear in the closing balance sheet. The target is to grow this business in the medium term to deliver a strong contribution to Nominet revenues and profitability, but it is still at an early stage and will require investment to grow revenue, deliver its software as a service based product, and that's through a growing channel of partners. The new wholly owned holding company subsidiaries we created in the year to hold Siglass and other future acquisitions are primarily for tax efficient purposes. We also made a further small purchase at the end of the year of the code and the domain of the vulnerability testing business XQ Cyber. This was purchased from the administrator of that business for £300,000, and we are looking to see how this technology can benefit our cyber propositions. Our cash flow reflects the strong operational performance combined with the purchase costs of both Siglass and XQ Cyber, underlying capital expenditure, our public benefit spend, and all of that resulted in an overall small net outflow for the year of £0.7 million. So overall, further progress for Nominet in FY20, remaining operationally robust in the face of COVID, with significant plans in place for the coming financial year and beyond to invest in programs across the registry business, the infrastructure backbone of Nominet, together with driving the growth in the cyber businesses. Thank you all for your time. I'll now hand back over to Rory.
Thanks, Ben. We're now going to take a short break to allow members to cast their votes. We will be resuming at 11:45.
Welcome back. Now I'd like to welcome Ellie Bradley, our MD of Registry and Public Benefit, who will be leading our session on expired domains. And there'll be time for some questions on this topic before we move on to the wider Q&A session at 12:15. So thank you. I'll hand over to Ellie now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So I'd like to talk a little bit about a topic which I know matters to many of the people joining us here today, what we do in relation to the release of expired names. Now, you'll be aware that the recent consultation followed on from the annual consultation and policy review process that we held back in 2019, where we were asking specifically around drop lists. In the intervening period, though, we've continued to receive complaints and concerns from a number of registrars around whether members and registrars are trying to circumvent some of the acceptable use policies, either through setting up additional memberships or by colluding to gain a greater access to systems. So what we wanted to do as we take this forward is think about how do we both deal with that issue about providing more certainty and clarity around when domains will drop, but also how do we make sure that in anything that we introduce, it doesn't shift the problem from one part of our registration systems to another. So in terms of where we are, we ran that consultation ending in the middle of August. We had a response from over 100 different stakeholders, mainly the domain name industry, but also further afield, for example, the IP community. And we heard a wide range of views, but it was, I appreciate, a really contentious topic for some. So what we wanted to do was, as quickly as possible, provide a bit more certainty and came out quite quickly after the consultation closed to take auctions off the table. We know that was not popular with many of those that responded to the consultation, not all by any stretch, but for many of those that responded. So we wanted to provide some clarity around that. Having said that, we're really clear that we do need to make some change. it won't be enough if we simply introduce drop lists, because we know the incentive to create additional memberships or work together around AUPs, which the vast majority of people don't do, but we think some do, will still be there. So we need to find a good way of addressing that issue too. And we think the way to do that is by providing economically controlled access or pay to play. How we do that, though, is obviously really, really important, and there are lots of decisions still to be taken. In terms of what we do as well in relation to drop lists, we know that there are dependencies between how we implement that approach. So if we go with a drop list where we release domain names at a single point of the day, so like the GTLD model, everything drops at, for example, 2 p.m. That creates different loads and different demands on the system to if we implement drop lists that release at a given time, a specified time that we make public, but spread throughout the day. So there are dependencies associated with both the drop list aspect, but also what we do around economically controlled access. So in terms of the current position, we think that that is the right approach. I think it is not possible to simply deal with abuse where it might potentially exist within the system. It's incredibly hard to prove. What we often see is complaints coming in from different parties complaining about each other. Very, very hard for us to manage appropriately. So we think we need a better approach to actually changing the system to address that. We've talked about potentially particular price points for the number of EPP connections. We've also heard suggestions that we should provide a free drop catching tag to all members and associated connections. I think the challenge there is it doesn't take away the incentive to also create new memberships. We've heard suggestions that we should link access to domains under management or potentially for accredited channel partners. Again, we need to think, does that actually mean that access is concentrated amongst the larger registrars? We've heard views that there should be increased compliance or that there should be higher barriers to entry to participate in this market, perhaps specific technical tests. All of these, I think, bear further exploration, and we really want to have a dialogue now and a discussion about what we do going forwards. We're clear that drop lists will create more transparency and clarity. We now need to think about how we implement a transparent and fair approach to allow those registrars that want to engage in the drop catching of domains to participate on a clear, kind of transparent playing field. And that's really important. So really happy to take comments or questions today. We've also got a webinar coming up next month on the 14th, where we want to really hear some ideas and constructive thoughts for how we can take this thinking forwards. We do think we need to make changes, but we want to make sure that those changes are right and give us the desired outcomes, and also really set us up for the future as well. So, a quick introduction. As Mark's already said, we've got the general Q&A coming up shortly. So for now, I'd be really interested to hear questions or comments in relation to how we handle expired names.
Okay, so I think we've got one question that covers this territory, Ellie, from Carl Heaton. So it's about economically controlled access. Why has no summary of the recent .uk expiry policy consultation been published? Given the member backlash to auctions, should members have a renewed role in policy development, for example, bringing back the PAB? And how much exactly will members have to pay to get access for expired domains?
Okay, so there's three separate points there. The first point is we will publish a full summary of the consultation. That will come in due course. The post that we did quite soon after the consultation closed very deliberately was trying to provide a bit more certainty and address some of the very strong concerns we'd had, particularly around the auction approach. So there will follow a formal consultation. I think the point about involvement in policy, the way we have policy development set up now is very deliberate. Of course, registrars are extremely important stakeholders in how we develop policy, but it is also about our broader stakeholders as well. We don't just hear from registrars or members, and we will actively go out on a particular policy topic to make sure we're hearing from those people that are impacted by that change. And the third point was the price, sorry. To be determined, and I think that is the point. We recognise we need to understand all the aspects of how this will be implemented to ensure we can set an appropriate price level. And that's part of the discussion that we want to take forward now.
Thanks, Ellie. There's another question from Rex. He's asking, can there please be a second consultation for the new proposals? What are your plans for that?
So the plan at the moment is not to have a further consultation. The consultation is intended to be around that kind of high-level principle. And now we're looking at what this looks like in terms of the operational detail. Of course, I think it's important that we kind of keep the conversation going, that we have the session on the 14th. I wouldn't take anything off the table, but equally, I think what we need to get onto now really is the kind of practical implications and really understanding the impact on registrars and really working that through with registrars as part of that continued dialogue.
Okay, thanks, Ellie. Next question's from James Tuplin. The question is, even with change, what reassurance do we have that Nominet will adhere to its own terms of service in the future? When complaints have been made against tag holders, there has been no transparency or deterrent for others to break terms and conditions.
So we do have acceptable use policies for our systems, and I think this is exactly the challenge that I was talking about earlier in the presentation. We do receive complaints from members and registrars intermittently. We sometimes receive complaints from members about each other. So we'll get a complaint in where two parties are complaining about each other. It's very hard to find sort of unequivocal evidence that parties are working in collusion or specifically breaching policies. If we can identify that, then we will take action. But it's a really hard task. And we're very aware that if we do take action, that has a significant impact on a registrar's business. So I think it's important, if people do have concerns, then do still raise them, of course. The challenge for us is when we're trying to identify sort of beyond all doubt that a specific abuse has taken place. And it can be quite tenuous, the information and evidence that's provided.
Okay, I don't think we've got any further questions on this topic, Ellie. Plenty of other questions.
I'm
not
sure.
so much on unexpected.
Okay. Well, I would really, the information on the webinar is, it's on the website. We'll provide further details. I'd be really keen to encourage as many registrars as possible to participate. And we will continue our thinking and development of the operational plans around how we address the expired domains challenge. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Ellie, and thanks for the questions. Now, I want to open up the floor for members' questions. We have about half an hour or so, also on wider topics. If you want to ask a question verbally, please go to your webinar control panel, select raise hand icon, turning it red, and when your turn arises, we'll unmute you to ask your question. Please state your own name and your company name before asking your question. Please note that you can lower your hand at any time by reselecting the raise hand icon to turn it back to green. Alternatively, you can type your question in the question box and it'll be read out for you. Just before we kick off, I just want to note we've had a couple more points of order. One raised questions about the validity of the voting system for the resolutions. I want to say I've taken legal advice and I'm confident the voting system is fully compliant with all the regulations and it'll carry on. The second was a request or a proposal for a vote on the reinstatement of the member forum. The answer to that is this is actually, I mean, first of all, it's an operational issue. Secondly, it's discussed at the board, which is where which is the appropriate forum for this discussion. And there was a board decision. So we will not be taking a vote on that. So on that, having registered those 2 points, let's open the floor and we'll take questions. Elaine, please. And I will field questions and hand them out to the executives or members of the board as appropriate.
Okay, so first question is from Susanna Clark, who first of all wants to congratulate Phil Buckingham on an excellent and well-deserved election victory. And her question, as part of full engagement, please could the board consider building a member constituency inside Nominet structures so a team of representatives of the membership can have presence on committees and participate at every stage of policy development? Might be one for you, Ellie.
So it's an interesting idea. Those that have been involved in Nominet for some time will remember that we have previously had, through the policy advisory body, a group for engaging in policy. When we reformed our policy development process, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we were very keen to do was make sure we got really wide representation and engagement in how we develop policy. I think it's always really important to remember that when we set policy around .uk, it has very far-reaching implications at times, way beyond our registrars and members often. So it's really important that we have a good balance and that we get a broad range of stakeholder perspectives. But it's, it's an interesting idea, and it's not something we have in the current plans, but we will always be looking for ways to continue to improve engagement and get members involved in our thinking and policy development.
I might add to that, Elaine, we do have a comprehensive sort of member engagement program, and we do really listen to the membership and try to meet as many as possible, and that goes on throughout the year. It's been sort of restricted in the past 6 months, but I think Nominet is very, very good at engaging with the membership. But thanks, Ellie, for noting that we'll pick up those points.
Okay, next question might also be for Ellie. And this is from Carl Heaton. In July 2018, Nominet announced it was working on a responsible disclosure policy, and it appears on the .uk roadmap. Why, if Nominet claims to be a security company, has a responsible disclosure policy not yet been produced?
Thank you. And it is, thanks for the question, it is still on the roadmap. That obviously doesn't mean that we're not constantly looking for and identifying and improving our security posture. It will be coming, so watch this space. If you do have any concerns or issues or things you would want to raise through such a policy, though, then do please let us know through the normal channels, and we can obviously investigate those and look into them. But it is coming.
Okay.
I just want to add to that. I mean, I did mention in my remarks that we're investing in the core business. We're 4 million this year, and that's just the registry development program. We're also looking at what we can do to strengthen our domain security, and that's an initiative that's very much focused on getting real traction this year. So that's a lot of investment that's going into the core business, some of which is on the internal processes, some of which is on external ways in which we can engage with members and registrants, and then also the point around security is incredibly important, and that's part of what we are looking at stepping up even more beyond where we are today.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Carl. Can Nominet or the company secretary please confirm, one, is Nominet is not a member of itself. Point two, Nominet not being a member has no weighted voting rights. Point three, if so, doesn't Nominet appearing as part of the calculations for 2020 weighted votes? Does that invalidate those calculations? Will a poll of members be taken instead? That might be one for Nick or Rory.
Rory. Or Nick. Okay. Nick Wemban-Smith.
Can you hear me? Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, happy to confirm. I think the company secretary's already had this query at least once, maybe more than once. Yes, of course, Nominet is not a member of itself, and of course, it doesn't have any voting rights. And yes, it does appear on the list because we do have some domains under management, but actually we ignore those for the purposes, and so that doesn't invalidate any of the voting rights calculations. And I hope that's clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question from Carl, then we'll move on to someone else. It's about voting rights. Can Nominet please outline in more detail the steps that have been put in place to uphold the Articles of Association and ensure that the weighted voting is properly calculated in the future? And a related question, can you commit to providing updated voting rights for 2018 and 2019, along with recalculated results from those votes. So first one, sort of future or next steps, and secondly, request for publishing data.
Okay. Do you want me to say that?
Yep.
Russell, yeah, why don't you?
Thanks for the question. We've investigated very thoroughly, actually, on the scale of the error. And we are confident that the margin of victory for the resolutions and the elections are so convincing that they can't be overturned. That said, we're not going to release the data for calculating because we've presented that to the board, and the board have got comfortable that that has integrity for 2018 and 2019. And I think in terms of releasing data, we've got nothing more really to add, even if the data was released, which we're not going to do, beyond the statement that we've issued. So I think what we can say is we've reached a conclusion that that is the correct voting outcome, and we should move forward.
Thank you. Okay, next question is from Kieran Davis. So hopefully you can hear us and we can hear you. If you can, fire away with your question, Kieran.
Yeah, in accordance with the articles, and as the chairman has refused to conduct a poll, I demand a poll to elect a chairman.
Okay, that one for Nick.
Nick, how we handle that one?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, unfortunately, it's not possible to just do demand polls on the day. You need to go through the normal processes of getting 5% votes, and these sort of ambush polls are not permitted. So my advice is
I
council
would like to
companies
correct
not take-
you. The articles clearly state that if someone demands a poll, it must be taken immediately.
for resolutions which have been tabled in advance in the notice of AGM, that would be
Article
right.
18, please read it.
Right, well, thanks, but we're not taking a poll on that question.
Thank you.
Okay, next hands up is from Rex Wickham. Rex, what's your question? Oh, I don't think we can hear Rex. Rex, if you don't. Hang on a second, I think we're trying to bring you in, Rex. Bear with us. Rex, I think you've self-muted. Could you pop off mute so you can ask your question? Okay, we'll come back to you. Let me pick another question. Let's go to a question from Andrew Bennett. Hi, Andrew. Andrew's question is, in the latest accounts, Nominet claims to have spent 1.7 million on public benefit and the same amount on board remuneration. Why is the board now valued the same as public benefit? Maybe Mark might want to come in initially.
Yes, I think the comparison isn't entirely appropriate. The costs of the board as they're listed include the executive director pay. That if the company didn't have a board, the executives would still be being paid. So you need to subtract that sum from the board pay. And then when you look at the cost of the rest of the board, actually in relative terms, it's very reasonable by comparison. But a second point is, and I think Russell can always say more on this, I think we have moved to a model where we have very targeted, very effective spending on public benefit, and we're measuring the outcomes and achieving very good outcomes. And a target of touching 1 million lives by 2020 was very ambitious, and it's quite clear we're going to make that. So I think we've moved to a different model, which is working very well, and I think we can all be proud of what's being achieved. I don't know if you want to say any more on that, Russell.
I don't have an awful lot more to add, other than just reinforcing the points that it shouldn't be about just spending a massive amount of money. What we're trying to do is make sure that we're looking at the efficacy of the expenditure, and that's centered around the purpose of Nominet, which has three components, as I mentioned in my speech, which was increasing connectivity, inclusivity, and security. And so that's a filter by which we appropriate money to initiatives that are all going to impact on the young lives that Mark mentioned. We're trying to reach 1 million, positive impact of 1 million young lives by the end of 2020. And as I say, the report's coming out this week, which you can take a look at. It's got all of the projects that we're backing in there, as well as a lot of the initiatives and how we're measuring that impact.
Okay, thank you. I've got Rex Wickham's question now. Sorry about the audio issues, Rex. So Rex's question is, how much was spent on now cancelled projects like TV Whitespace? How big a loss or profit was made? Do you think your recent expensive purchases will result in a profit or a loss? Maybe one for you, Russell or Ben.
Russell or Ben, I think.
Yeah, let me kick off. I mean, the reality is we don't separately disclose the amounts in the accounts on investments that we make in these new business areas. That's not because we're trying to duck the question. It's more because a lot of these areas are very nascent and are high risk. So when we go into these areas, we're looking at where we can identify opportunities to build out businesses in the long term. So if you think about where we are at the moment, we've got the domain business, which is the here and now. We've got the cybersecurity business, which is being developed and reaching around £10 million in ARR as we build that business. And then we're looking at where we can grow that into the future. And the idea behind the autonomous vehicles and the spectrum management was almost the kind of moonshot ideas where we can identify real opportunities for growth, which always carry high risk. And so when it comes to recognizing that we don't feel as though there's a shorter term area where we can scale, we've had to make the sensible decision, I think, to look at stopping those activities and stopping those investments. But as I said in my opening remarks, what we've done is we've really tried to grow the cyber business. We're growing the registry business, and we're making sensible investments in those areas, and recognizing where some of the areas that we looked at from a kind of R&D standpoint, we're not going to scale. So it's about balancing some of these shorter term projects and the longer term projects based on whether we think we can commercialize some of those initiatives.
Thank you. Next question sounds like one for Jane. It's from Cyprian. What justifies the salary of the CEO? What performance indicators are used? I personally find this hard to justify considering the failure in the spectrum management business, and you can probably appoint the janitor in this role, and Nominet will still be a very profitable company by virtue of being a monopoly. So sounds like that's one for Jane. Hello, Jane.
Hi. Well, thanks for the question. Right. Well, it's focused on the CEO. I'll give the answer for the whole executive team because the same points apply. The remuneration is set by the Remuneration Committee. We have an excellent management team. We set them challenging targets and they've outperformed those targets. We know as the REMCOM that we operate in a very competitive market sector. We get independent research data on pay structures and pay levels in our sector. And to attract and retain good people, we need to recognise that and offer competitive packages. That's what we do. We have challenging performance targets, and the results that we get are testimony to the quality of our team. I absolutely dispute the idea that a janitor could do the job and the company would still be profitable. That really, really isn't the case. And from my point of view, we have an excellent team and the board's point of view, and long may that continue.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Next question is from Kieran Davis, who has his hand up. So can we unmute Kieran? You can hear us. Fire away, Kieran.
To consider my complaints as required by the Members' Code.
So, sorry, could you start that question again? I think we just got the second half of it.
Yeah, I have made two separate complaints under the Members' Code of Conduct. When will the chairman convene the Members' Code of Conduct Committee to consider my complaints as required by the Members' Code?
Is it one for Mark or Rory? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll ask Rory to answer that, as Company Secretary.
Thanks, Mark. We did receive a couple of complaints relating to the members' code this year. We investigated the matters and concluded that there was insufficient evidence to proceed with any proceedings for the Code of Conduct Committee. So it was not convened.
Okay. A question from Andrew Bennett. Are you going to appoint new election scrutineers next year? For you, maybe?
Thanks, Andrew. We have no plans to change our election scrutineers next year. We do, however, look at who provides support around the elections each year as part of the nominations committee's work.
Okay, thanks, Rory. Next question is from Carl. It's one for Mark. Does the chair accept you should not be involved in the voting rights for the years in which those votes elected him? I think he's referring to the resolution there.
Yeah, it's a strange one. The issue around the voting rights has been looked at by external scrutineers. I mean, it's been assessed, and the recalibration has been authenticated and verified, and we've looked at the corrections, and we've made sure that the process is robust. As Russell said, there's been a reassessment of past votes, and there's no evidence at all that the votes would have turned out any differently. There's really no requirement to go back and reassess those, whether it regards my resolution on my position or anybody else's.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Andrew again. Nominet seems to have spent $6 million on acquiring Siglass and only made £26,000 in net revenue. When does Nominet expect to make back more than the acquisition cost? Probably one for you, Russell.
Yeah, so thanks, Andrew. When you acquire businesses, particularly early stage businesses, one has to invest behind those organizations to get them to scale. The business, Siglass, is sold by the channel. It's facing some headwinds given some COVID challenges at the moment, but we expect that business to grow quickly over the course of the next couple of years. It really is a tremendous product and has some amazing people as well. So it's not just the business that we are looking at scaling, it's also the people within it as we start to grow more in the cyber space, and the network detection and response arena through a SaaS-based platform that they have is truly impressive. So we are optimistic that we can grow that revenue. It will take some investment and time. I can't give you a precise date, but we are very much supporting that business to grow and succeed in the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you. Next question from Carl. What might be one for Ellie. Does Nominet provide service level agreements to its commercial activities? Will Nominet commit to providing the same service level agreements to its .uk registrar customers who continue to fund its commercial ambitions?
Thank you. So we do have a range of different SLAs that we have in place around our core registry business, around things like customer service, and our systems. But I think it's interesting to think about whether the SLAs that would be in place for other parts of the business would be directly applicable. I'd be really interested to hear if there are particular issues or challenges with the way any of the systems in relation to the registry business are operating now, where an SLA would help in terms of providing greater certainty for registrars. So we're absolutely committed to providing really, really high standards of service, whether that's when you call up and want some support, or whether that's using a system. If there's an area where you think we could look to provide more commitment around it, let us know.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Frank. I've listened to plans to expand Nominet into cybersecurity. How do you defend using domain name registration fees to subsidise a move towards business that is effectively eating some members' lunches? You.
Yeah, I've heard this quite frequently over the years, that we've almost got two pots of money, one that goes into domains and one that goes into something else. It's one business, and we manage it like that. So when we look at domains, I think you're missing the point slightly that on cybersecurity, we're providing nation state cybersecurity capabilities. And part of what we're trying to do here is keep the .uk namespace as safe and secure. That helps you as members, it helps us as a business give confidence that .uk is a great place to be online. But equally, providing software and capabilities on the active cyber defense platform is something that we should all be very proud of. Keeping government employees safe, particularly around this time, I think has been more important now than ever before. So I think that we shouldn't look at it as two separate pots. We are trying to invest in areas where we think it will grow the overall business, and that's what the board are focused on, to try and make sure that we're growing a business that's diversified and is going to be as important in the next 2 decades as it has been in the last 2.
Okay, thanks, Russell. Next question is from Dinesh. It's quite a long one. One of the advantages of members being involved in policy development would have been to refer to the membership and ask for their thoughts on the forum. Did I miss the membership being asked about this? Well, I do think we should be looking forward, and maybe the forum was past its date, but the replacement does not seem good enough. Will the membership be asked for input on how to make the replacement better for member discussions? That might be one for you, Ellie.
Thanks, Elaine. No, there wasn't a specific question, but will we involve members in helping to design those engagement activities going forwards? I think absolutely. I think that, Russell and Mark talking about having a regular call where they're open to questions. I think one of the first things you might want to ask about is how best to manage that engagement piece. So I think it is important that we continue to evolve the way we work. I think it would be really challenging given the very, very low numbers of members that actually engage in the forum. Really hard to get most people to even participate, and so to involve themselves in a discussion around the future of the forum may also be a challenge. But I think hopefully new processes, new approaches will actually really improve the breadth of engagement that we see.
Yeah, I'll just build on that. I mean, just to add some stats to this, 75% of members don't have an account or didn't have an account on the forum. That says something right there, which is we've got to have a broader engagement. And what I'd like to do is to have a regular check-in points with members, so we can have discussion that on matters that really are important to you. And so this is not about rowing back from member engagement. We want to actually step into more member engagement, but do it on a really productive footing, which I don't think the forum was.
Thank you. A question from James Tuplin. How can members specifically see the contributions of non-executive directors in board meetings? Are minutes of meetings available? Can we contact non-executive directors to raise our comments and suggestions for discussion in future meetings?
Shall I take that?
Yes, please.
I mean, the board operates as it should. We do take best practice, best corporate practice, best FTSE 100 practice as a model for our board. A lot of the discussions that the board is engaged in are commercially sensitive, and therefore it really would not be appropriate to publish minutes, although we do try to immediately convey important issues which relate to the membership. Every member is welcome to communicate with the board, but you need to do that through the company secretary. The elected directors also have, I know, are open to approaches, but approaches to the board as a whole need to come through the company secretary, and we will deal with them. We're always open to suggestions and questions, and we'll respond to them.
Okay. Next question is about fast hosts from Cyprian. What current action are you taking regarding the stolen.uk brackets expired rights from fast hosts. How many expired.uk names were moved in this way? Has a proper investigation been carried out, considering the fact that personal information has been abused? Was the ICO notified? Might be one for you, Ellie.
Okay, thank you. So there's a number of matters there. I think there has been an investigation on in terms of making sure we understood exactly the extent of the issue, which I'm pleased to say, although clearly had an impact, was relatively contained. And that's obviously something that's something positive to draw from it. It was important, obviously, to minimise the impact on those registrants where domains were moved away to a third party, and that has been concluded. In terms of the data side of matters, I think this is really a question for FastHost themselves as the data controller to consider whether they need to report anything in relation to the issues there. And then the broader point around where domains were moved to someone else. We're just concluding our thinking around that and an investigation into whether anything further needs to happen there. I think the priority, though, obviously was moving back to the position we were in before those changes took place.
Okay, thanks, Ellie. Next question is from Greg Finlay. If the voting rights data for 2018-19 was so conclusive, why won't that data be released to put member concerns to rest?
Well, I mean, just to repeat, we have done the analysis ourselves based on the data that we have, and as I say, the margins of victory were convincing, and so we've got nothing more to add other than what we've distributed. I don't think it's helpful for us to distribute the data. I think, as I said, I think now's the time to move on, and we are comfortable as a board that that data is accurate and convincing to the extent that we don't need to worry about the election results for 2018 or 2019, given the margin of victory.
Okay, thanks, Russell. Next question is from Carl Heaton. It's about conflicts of interest. Now GoDaddy has acquired Newstar. You now have a board member working for GoDaddy Registry. How do you manage that conflict of interest? GoDaddy Registry, prior to acquisition, won the contract for .co, which Nominet lost. Who knew about Nominet's bid for .co, and why did you lose that contract? What is stopping GoDaddy Registry approaching the government and offering to run .uk more economically or successfully? Conflict of interest, probably initially to you, Mark,
yes.
please.
First of all, this is not the first time we've had a conflict of interest at board level. We've had them in the past, and we've always dealt with them very efficiently. And many other boards have the same issue with conflicts of interest among directors. In this particular case, we're dealing with a board member, James Bladel, of utter integrity, and a company, GoDaddy, of utter integrity. As soon as we became aware of any conflicts, we agreed procedures to manage them with James, and he is excluded from certain papers and certain discussions, and he often volunteers to be excluded from certain discussions and certain papers. So he was never at any stage aware of any information which would have compromised his position or given GoDaddy an advantage. And that's the way it remains. And I'm James himself may want to speak or he may not, but there is, as far as I'm concerned, it has been handled totally properly. James, I don't know if you want to say a word on this.
Yes, thanks, Mark. And just to echo your comments, that this is not unusual position for directors, especially elected NEDs in Nominet. For example, we had a previous board member for several years in an identical position, and as a result, Nominet has some very comprehensive procedures to ensure transparency for any conflicts or potential conflicts, as well as managing recusals and information sanitization. And I probably should acknowledge Rory and Mark for their extra efforts that they go through to maintain that separation. I just want to add as well that my role at GoDaddy is also similarly governed by conflicts of interest policies that separate registry and registrar activities very strictly, and so we have the policies on both sides. But But I would just to the remainder of the question, I don't believe I had any awareness of the .co bids on either side of that transaction, as it was prior to the acquisition, and I wasn't aware of the Nominet bid until after it was submitted as well. So that's my response. Thanks.
Thank you, James.
Okay.
Let me just respond to that last point as well, if I may, which is about competition. Do we face competition? I think we work on the assumption that we face competition. The best way to deal with competition is to make sure you have a dynamic, well-managed company, which is led by very good people, has an extremely good executive team, and is also growing the business and adding to capabilities like technological capability. That's how you retain core contracts. If you do not have that capability, then you are at risk. But with that capability, when you have dynamic, ambitious management, you're going to get a growth business if you're lucky, and that's what we've got. And we can be very proud that we've been growing so successfully into cybersecurity, which is a branch of business which is based on our capabilities in the domain security space. So the answer is you retain your contracts and your business by being better than the rest, and that's what we intend to do.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Quite short on time, so squeeze in a few questions if I can. Carl Heaton would just like to ask, can Nominet say more about the further steps that have been taken to prevent any further errors around voting rights calculations?
Yeah, I can touch on it. Maybe Rory wants to expand. Going forward, we want to ensure that we're getting the election results for 2021 and beyond assessed by an independent body. That could be our auditors or it could be somebody else. But the idea is to make sure that the raw data and as well as the calculations from the scrutineer are checked throughout the process.
Okay.
Rory, anything to add?
No, I don't think it's much to add. I think probably worth highlighting that the board will have an oversight role in ensuring that the procedures in place are correct.
Okay, next question is from Adelaire. Mr. Howarth said a few times that Nominet is keeping government staff safe. How is Nominet performing this task? Since security is not monolithic, which part of government security is Nominet doing?
So it's public knowledge that Nominet is part of the Active Cyber Defence program. So if you go onto the NCSC's website, or we can send you the link, that there's a report on there that identifies what the Active Cyber Defence platform is. Coincidentally, it's being really looked at by the UK government to exemplify what the UK government is doing. And I think the UK government is an exemplar when it comes to cybersecurity and keeping their employees safe. And we play an active role in that. And they are really looking at how they can develop that both for the UK and other countries are looking in on what the UK have done. And we should play a role in the success of that initiative.
Okay, thanks. Question from Volker. While the margins may have been significant, the inflations, deflations of voting rights on the side of smaller members were sometimes quite significant. In one instance, a member had his votes inflated by a factor of 6. Don't you agree that the release of corrected calculations, is therefore imperative to put to rest any doubt in the results?
Nothing to add to that other than what I've said already, which is we've got nothing further to say on the matter other than the fact that we are confident in the resolutions and the outcome.
Can I add,
okay.
Elaine? The role of the board is to hold the executive to account, and I can just say that on this particular issue, there's been a very thorough investigation, and the board has really looked into it and is very satisfied by the way it's been handled. That doesn't mean everything has to be made public. That's what the board is there for. It's carried out its responsibility, and it's done it very rigorously. So I agree with everything Russell said on that point.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Rex Wickham. In the annual report, some holding companies were mentioned for example, Nominet UK holding company set up in February this year. What is the purpose of those companies, please? So it's either Ben or Russell.
Yeah. Well, let's bring Ben in because he's been rather quiet in the corner.
I'm very happy to take that one. It's entirely normal as part of any acquisition process and any planning process that we would bring in subsidiary holding companies to hold the companies that are acquired, if they are separate companies that are acquired. Often the primary reason for that is to make sure we've got an efficient tax grouping and structure, obviously for both the UK and for overseas.
Okay, thank you. A question from Gavin Kimpton. Why is Nominet obsessed with operating as a commercial business? Other country code registries don't work in this way. Has Nominet forgotten its core purpose is managing the .uk namespace for the country?
I'll say that.
Okay.
So we're definitely not forgotten our core purpose of managing the namespace. What we are is sometimes people will term Nominet as a not-for-profit. That's never been true. And we are a commercial entity. What we are set up by limited by guarantee. So with restrictions on how we distribute our balance sheet, the cash on the balance sheet, and various other issues that you'll be very familiar with as a member. But the point is we're not trying to just be a domain registry. We recognize that the domain is incredibly important and we can invest a lot of money into the domain business. But we also need to look forward and try and develop a business that is fit for growth into the future. After all, the board is here to ensure the business is on sound footing from a core business perspective, but equally has a future and longevity into the future. And that's the reason why we've been trying to find areas to diversify into. And I think cybersecurity is a really good fit for Nominet, and keeping people safe online is one of the things which we do as our own business and one of the things that we can do now for others.
Okay, thank you. Conscious of time, I'm going to sort of merge together a couple of questions on .uk and domains under management. So a question from Andrew Bennett and Carl Heaton asking similar things. This month, over 1 million .uk names have dropped from the registry. The registry total has dropped from 11.8 down to 10.5. The same total as in June 2014 when the second level .uk project started. Why is this? Who's responsible? And going forward, what is the plan for second level .uk? For you, Ellie.
Shall I pick that one up?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we always knew that we were going to see some very lumpy numbers in terms of domain under management as a result of the release of .uk. We went ahead with that very much because we wanted to ensure that .uk more broadly continue to remain competitive. It's very much what you see within other country codes, and still think that's absolutely important. We've got 1.3 million .uk domain names now under management. And I think we're now in a much more stable place. We were going to see that sort of bumpy impact as a result of the promos and things that were in place around the release time. So we've got a good, strong registry number now. We'll continue to remain focused on how we work with registrars, on growing that through promotions activity, through co-marketing. But I think now we've kind of finally washed through the last elements of right of registration, and it's very much now about looking forward and thinking about how we keep investing in .uk and working with our registrars to grow.
Okay, thank you. Quick question from Edward Dorr. Has Nominet considered making any pieces of software that's developed over the years publicly available under an open source license as part of its public benefit scope? It would be nice to give something back.
We did do, we have done that in the past, actually. We did something around, out of our innovation lab around buttons. I'm looking at Russell. Remember those times?
It was in the IoT area, where we're looking at where we could expand into the healthcare sector for dementia. And so whilst, again, similar to other projects like spectrum management, what we did is found a really good home for open source software, and people can pick that up and run with those initiatives. And so in the case of the dementia project, that was absolutely open sourced and picked up. And to the extent that we can do that again, then we would certainly like to do that.
Okay, thank you. Got a question from Andrew, then I'll take the last two questions from Craig Marshall. So Andrew's question is, for 24 years, Nominet has held AGMs in person with a hybrid approach to online engagement. After the threat of COVID-19 passes, will Nominet return to inviting members to its AGM in person? One for Mark, I suspect.
Yeah, I mean, we think this is actually a more efficient way of managing AGMs. I think we've got about 60 people on this call. That's far more than we normally reach at an AGM. And it means we're geared to doing a virtual AGM and taking in questions from more members. So it seems like a good format. In the past, very few people have turned up in person to AGMs. I mean, a very, very small number. And a lot of companies are moving this way. Virtual AGMs work efficiently. So that's why we put forward a resolution, because we just think it's a better way of engaging with members. Simple as that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on to two questions from Craig Marshall. First one, given recent rises in domain name registration pricing, why has Nominet been unable to realise the saving of economies of scale that are enjoyed passed on to customers in other IT businesses? For example, Amazon AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud have now grown their product and service portfolio, and they've steadily reduced their pricing. By contrast, Nominet's costs and pricing have increased. Under the current environment, members would seem to face increased pricing as the business of Nominet grows. How do the board propose to drive down costs and pass these savings on to members?
Okay. Want me to have a crack at that? So that's a good question. I think that one of the things which we've tried hard to do is grow in a way that is beneficial for the P&L over time. But when it comes to domains and what we've done there, as I mentioned earlier on, what we're continuing to do is invest in the registry platform. The board approved £4 million investment. So you need to reach a certain size of scale before you start to get the economies of scale. And quite frankly, where we are at the moment is we're still investing behind the registry platform quite significantly, actually, over the course of the next couple of years. And because in some areas we've not invested in the platform where we could have done. So we recognise that times are changing. To be a secure and stable online platform with increased security threats, which they always are, we need to invest in new areas. And we don't get the economies of scale until perhaps further down the line when we grow the business. You mentioned price increase. I don't know whether you missed it, but when I spoke earlier on, I mentioned that we weren't going to put the price up this year. So we are going to try and find cost savings where we can. At the moment, we're investing quite a lot in our registry business because we want to make sure it's fit for the future. Once that business grows and continues to grow, I think as we move into perhaps more hybrid and cloud environments, we should start to see some savings. But I think the most important thing is we keep ahead of the curve from a technology perspective, and we make sure that we've got a secure registry, and all of that requires good people and investment.
I think that I'm going to just add to that. I think that's absolutely right. And it's not just technology solution. There are people involved, whether that's people supporting our customers, whether that's registrants or registrars, people engaging with members. It's about how we continue to make .uk as safe and secure as possible, how we invest in data. So there's a wide range of aspects. Also thinking about the commercial side as well and how we continue to grow our co-marketing and promotional activity as well. So it's not just a simple equation, but obviously we're always focused on cost where we can be as well.
Okay. Second question from Craig. Does the board recognise the growing dissatisfaction of a growing number of smaller members with the board and the operation of Nominet? If not, why not? But if so, what does the board propose to do to ensure smaller members feel they're being treated equally with larger members who pay exactly the same membership fee?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Listen, I think small members or large members, the members are all important. Hopefully, we'll try and engage with members in a way that will recognise that everybody has a voice into the membership engagement process. As I said, one of the things that I think we would be better moving forward is a constructive dialogue about what we can do to make Nominet.uk and the broader industry better moving forward. So I think there's a real opportunity now to engage with members, large or small, on what we can do to make the .uk flourish in an increasingly competitive environment.
Okay, thanks, Russell. Question from Frank. How do you defend the move into selling cybersecurity products in competition with members?
Well, personally, I don't think we've ever come across a member that's trying to compete against us. Our core business in the cybersecurity arena is selling into the active cyber defence platform established by the UK government, and I'm not aware of any members that we're competing with.
Okay, I think we're pretty much out of time. Sorry, but we've run over by a considerable margin. So my bad time.
That's all right.
So I think we got through the vast majority of the questions that came in.
Good. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks, and thanks for allowing that extra time. Okay. So I think we can move on. Thanks for all the questions. And now for the formal business of today's meeting. I declare that the meeting as convened by notice of AGM to be open and that a quorum of members is present. The notice convening the AGM sets out 2 ordinary resolutions and a special resolution. I'm calling a poll count on each of the resolutions. The ordinary resolutions are: number 1, that the annual report and financial statements of the company for the extended accounting period ended 31st of March 2020 be and are received. Number 2, that Grant Thornton UK LLP, Chartered Accountants and Statutory Auditor of 3140 Rowan Place, John Smith Drive, Oxford Business Park South, Oxford, be reappointed as the auditors of the company to hold office from the conclusion of this meeting until the conclusion of the next general meeting of the company at which audited accounts are laid, at a remuneration to be fixed by the directors. Number 3, special resolution that Article 5 of the company's Articles of Association be amended in order to enable future meetings of the company to be held virtually. I will now ask Rory Kelly, our company secretary, to read out the voting results.
Thank you, Chair. So as the Chair just explained, we had 2 ordinary resolutions which required a 50% vote in order to be passed, and the special resolution required a 75% vote to be passed. We conducted a poll count to ensure that all votes, including proxies, have been counted. The results have just arrived from Civica. So in relation to the first resolution regarding the annual report, we had 133 members vote and 83% voted in favour. So that resolution has passed. Regarding the second resolution, regarding the reappointment of the auditors, again, we had 133 members vote and the percentage was 78 in support of. So again, that resolution has passed. And on the final special resolution, we had 145 members vote, and that resolution was passed with a majority of 88%.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Rory. That concludes the formal part of the meeting. So we can now conclude. I just want to say, just in conclusion, the board is very conscious of its responsibilities to the membership. And this is always a central topic at board meetings and in executive reports. But the board also has responsibility to ensure this is a dynamic, growing business, and we take both of those responsibilities very seriously. When you stand back and look at what Nominet is achieving and what it's achieved over the past year and where it's going, it's impressive. And I think everybody should, all members should be impressed and proud of what is happening with this organization. And we've come a long way, and the prospects are looking very exciting. I look forward to Nominet continuing to thrive in the coming year, supported by its membership and its networks around the world, powered by a dedicated and expert staff and a very committed and very engaged board. And we'll have a virtual AGM next year, I think, when I hope we'll get even more members involved. So thank you for taking part in this one. Thank you for joining us, and good day to you. Thank you.